Welcome back, everybody. It's the Dr. Treefruit and Don podcast. I'm Don Seifert, and I'm here with Dr. Kari Peter. Say hi, Kari.
Hi there.
Dr. Sean Kumar. Say hi, Sean.
Hello, everyone.
And Dr. Greg Krawczyk. Say hi, Greg.
Good morning, everyone.
And we are going to start today with Dr. Kumar. Sean, you're going to give us a bit of an update on maturity and where we're at. And we have started the Apple maturity updates, so I'll let you get to it.
Sure. Thanks, Don. Like Don was mentioning, we have maturity updates that come out at 1 p.m. Every Tuesday afternoon. I think we started 2 weeks ago. If you were one of those people who checked your email as soon as the email came in this week, you would have noticed that there wasn't an update. It was just about half an hour delayed, but we do put out the updates every Tuesday afternoon. And so as we have just finished with our first variety of harvest in Adams County, Wildfire Gala, a lot of that Wildfire Gala was harvested last week, and beautiful color, and we got off to a great start. And the rest of the state is harvesting Wildfire Gala. If you have that early sport of Gala, they're harvesting it this week. And slowly in Adams County, I think we are starting to get ready for harvesting our premieres. There's also other early varieties like Zestar. If you have some other early varieties too, they might be coming on. So the consensus for harvest, like how harvests are looking this year, is that we are about 4 to 5 days, 4 to 5 days early than normal. If you remember, last year was a super early year for harvest. So most of the early varieties were harvested 2 weeks in advance, if you can remember last year. So that's going to be about 3 to 5 days after last year's date is when potentially most of your harvest is going to come on average, based on the growing degree days, which means if you harvested last year on, say August 1st, then this year, most likely, you're going to have the same maturity level in August 4th, 5th, 6th, something like that. So 3 to 5 days after last year's harvest date. Just to remind that last year it was quite early, 2 weeks early, in fact. And so that's the general consensus on where we are. And the other thing I did want to mention is last week we had some really hot days. So when you have 90 plus days and you're harvesting fruit, like if you harvested the day before and you harvested the day after that 90 plus day, you can have a significant change in your firmness and other quality parameters that could affect how you store your fruit. For example, if you harvested, say, your Wildfire Gala the day before the 90 plus hot day, you might have had firmness that was suitable for long-term storage or medium-term storage or medium-term controlled atmosphere storage. But if you had noticed after the 90 plus day, or even in the evening of the 90 plus day, the fruit have been exposed to that 90 plus day for the whole day, you might have noticed that, what we are seeing is that the firmness significantly drops, sometimes by 2 pounds, 3 pounds, even in that single day or 2 days of high heat. And that might be the difference between storing them medium term versus storing them long term because of the reduction in firmness. So just want you to be aware that, just a single day of really hot weather can have an impact on firmness. And as you know, some of the retailers look at firmness as one of the major characteristics of purchasing fruit. And so just keep aware, especially, if you're doing some tests on your own and you check on Monday, but you end up harvesting the variety on Tuesday or Wednesday, it can be very different if you have a very hot day in between. And so that's just something to keep in mind. And if you have to harvest a little bit early because of that heat, then it's better to harvest that earlier than later, is what I'm trying to say with that sort of heat. We've had since then, we've had some good coloring weather, so to speak, because we've had a good divide between the day and night temperatures. We are hovering anywhere in the 80s, but in the nighttime, it seems to still cool down to 60s. And in general, they are good. They're good days for coloring weather. And just want to go into a little bit of specifics. We are getting ready in Adams County to harvest Premier Honeycrisp sometime late this week, early next week, and they are quite ready. And so we last time we checked on Tuesday or Monday this week. Earlier we saw a starch index of 5.8, but for Honeycrisp, of course, we don't use starch index as a primary method of determining firmness. Because the starch index can suddenly change and vary. So we look at other parameters too, including the background color and the firmness. We are at 17 pounds of firmness, and we have background color has reduced to almost yellow, so it shows that it's ready to be harvested or close to ready to be harvested. And for Premier Honeycrisp that has been retained, we have seen an upholding of firmness in those varieties where you'll have a 6 to 10 day advantage in terms of holding the fruit longer on the tree. And then so we're going to move into premieres. We're still a few weeks away from harvesting Honeycrisp, looking at a harvest date of approximately the last week of August, first week of September for harvesting regular Honeycrisp. Now, the other thing I did want to mention is if you are planning to retain your blocks, just wanted to give some general advice on retain. For Honeycrisp, when using retain, it works really well about 3 to 4 weeks before harvest. So this week is the right week to retain your Honeycrisp. So if you haven't retained your Honeycrisp yet, this week is the right week. Usually, I've seen that for Pennsylvania, a half rate of retain works really well in a sense that it helps to extend that harvest window, but also is still able to not completely retard color development, because that's always the clash that we have, right, when we're using retain, because when we use retain, we'd usually see a dip in color development. So for Honeycrisp, especially, a half rate of retain about 3 to 4 weeks before harvest is ideal for you to use to help prevent that as a stop drop to stop the fruits from dropping off, but also store it for slightly longer so that you have time to harvest your blocks. And for Gala, if you are having Gala blocks that you want to retain, because of the heat, we've had an interesting few weeks now because we've had some really hot weather and then we have cooled down again. Usually Gala as well, 3 weeks is ideal. So you still have some time to retain your Galas, maybe next week or the week after. But if it gets hot again, like I see next week again getting slightly hot, depending on how the weather is next week, I think that we can moderate our retain applications based on that. So if it's very hot weather, retain applications for Gala can go as low as 2 weeks before anticipated harvest. And if it's slightly cooler and more pleasant weather, then you can go up to 3 weeks before anticipated harvest for retain application. And you can do a full application of retain. And so this year we are testing different combinations of retain, a seed, and harvester to try to understand, how can we ensure good quality that is being upkept, but also help improve the color. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But those are some of the recommendations for retaining your blocks, especially Honeycrisp and Gala. And I think that's all for me. And I hope you are continuing to follow the maturity updates. And please let any one of us know if you have any, Don, Daniel, or I, if you have any questions regarding the report. And especially also if you want to see another variety that's being represented in the report as well. Some unique variety that's new, you want some information on that, we're happy to test that for you as well. But that's it for me.
Cool. Sounds good, Sean. Thanks.
Thanks, Don.
Dr. Peter.
Okay, so we were talking about harvest, and I always remind people just because you're harvesting fruit doesn't mean that disease is no longer a threat. I think this is going to be a very interesting post-harvest rot year. And so why? Well, it probably goes without saying based on how it's been raining so consistently since early May. And I think I've mentioned the consistent rain in just about every single podcast since we started the season, or like partway through the season. But as I was putting out the disease update for this week, I went through the weather data for us here in Biglerville, and I was curious, like how much rain we had gotten from April 1st, that's when the season's really ramping up. I mean, we had bud break in March, but I'm counting like April 1st as like the start time, when we really have green tissue pushing out there. April 1st to July 31st. So in 2023 and 2024, during that time frame from April 1st to July 31st, we had a little over 13 inches of rain both years, in 2023 and 2024. In 2025, in the same exact time period from April 1st to July 31st, here in Adams County at Freck, we have had over 21 inches of rain in that time period. So up until very recently, really the last week and a half or so, we've been getting about 1 to 2 inches of rain a week. And we've just had ideal conditions for all the diseases, especially the rots. In the case of bitter rot, as I'm listening to Premier Honeycrisp that talks about Premier Honeycrisp being harvested, this is an excellent bitter rot year. So bitter rot is a rot that really, unfortunately, targets Honeycrisp, whether it's Premier, whether it's regular Honeycrisp, or whether it is a variety where Honeycrisp is apparent. And so on our premieres, I had some research experiments going on, and in my untreated, I had 100% infection of my untreated fruit with bitter rot this year. And I saw infection as early as about the third week in June, which is really early. So if that's any indication of what we're up against with regards to the rot potential, and especially latent rots showing up in storage, I think this might be a challenging year overall. With that said, because of such the ideal conditions we've had this season for rots, even though some may not be obvious right now, but I'm telling you, they're out there and they may show up in storage, it is imperative to not stretch out your last fungicide sprays as you're gearing up for harvest. I know for a fact there are some growers out there, their last fungicide sprays go on in August, and then that's it. And guess what? Those growers end up having some problems. How do I know? It's because I hear from the packers. And so that's how I know that that's when there's some significant problems out there and people not timing their last fungicide sprays appropriately. Just because Premier is coming off doesn't mean you stop treating your other varieties. Just because Gala and the regular Honeycrisp is coming off doesn't mean you can forget about Pink Lady and Fuji's and other varieties that are being harvested in the latter half of September and in October. So it is imperative that you not stretch those intervals of your last spring and harvest. Because I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball with knowing what kind of rainfall we're going to have over the next couple months. Just be mindful, we are in tropical storm hurricane season. And so that inevitably dumps. If we're in the path, and usually it's the remnants, we get dumped with a lot of rain. Last year we had 2 or 3 events that really impacted us significantly. So moving forward, as you're thinking about your last sprays, Captan is always good. I'm all for Captan. However, think about stronger chemicals, and hopefully you've saved some sprays of Maravon and or Luna Sensation or Flynn Extra, which is just straight Frac 11. So Maravon has a 0-day PHI. Maravon also has on its label control for post-harvest diseases like gray mold and blue mold. So that's why I'm a big fan of Maravon. And I can tell you right now, packers are a big fan of Maravon too, of having it as a last spray, because you are going to help them out. And in turn, in helping them out, you're helping yourself out with regards to your pack out. Because when your fruit is going to be packed and running on the line, every little bit of protection is going to help you as they stay in storage, because the fruit are still maturing in storage. Those latent rots will manifest. We don't know what the magic signal is, but it does happen. And we do know through my student Johanni's work is that the majority of post-harvest rots that are coming out of storage in the Mid-Atlantic start in the field. So that's alternaria rot and bullseye rot are the 2 top rots. And so they make up about 60% of the rots coming out of storage. And they all start in the field. and we are not entirely certain of the infection periods that in the meantime, there are still tools that you have to try to suppress these infections. So please don't stretch your intervals. And also remember, your control, your post-harvest rot control starts in the field. Other things that you can be doing as far as limiting your rots in the orchard at this moment in time is when you're harvesting, or if you're going through your first round of picking, you come across any rotten fruit, just drop it to the ground. Mother Nature will take it over and decompose it, and it's not going to become a problem. Get it out of the canopy so those spores aren't there to infect clean fruit that may be there. And just remember, the more mature your fruit, the more it's going to be susceptible to post-harvest diseases or to basically those latent infections manifesting. So if you are picking your more mature fruit, you want to move those very quickly. So get those out. Don't have them hang out in storage too much. Be careful when you're picking your fruit. Bruised or wounded fruit are susceptible to post-harvest diseases like blue mold. Blue mold, which again, blue mold spores are in every cold storage that's out there. Everyone has blue mold. You can try it. There's really tough time to eradicating it. You can lessen the numbers, but it's there. Blue mold needs a wound, or it needs some kind of weakness in the fruit to get in. Wounds, stem punctures, bruises, they can be an entry point. Rots, other latent rots could possibly also be an entry point for those for blue mold. And also as a reminder for blue mold, this is another friendly reminder. I know I've talked about this a lot, but the blue mold pathogen, the penicillium fungus, and the dominant one in the cold storage as we see is Penicillium expansum, but there's other species of penicillium as well that produces the mycotoxin patulin. So patulin is tightly regulated in the processing industry. So if you are moving your fruit to a juicer or to a processor, your lot of fruit will be tested. If you exceed the threshold, you will get that fruit back. So this is just a word to the wise. And this I'll remind you folks again as far as later, because really this becomes more problematic as fruit sit in storage and fruit are moved to processors later in the year, like in November, December, January. Um, um, as far as doing your best when you're harvesting, if you can keep the bins cool, if they're possibly to be in the shade and they aren't cooking in the sun, this also can decrease your chances because when fruit warm up, again, they're going to be maturing faster, and also that's going to be a signal to any latent infections to pop up because that hastening of the maturity. And then also, if you can do your best as far as delivery, if you do deliver to a pack house, to keep that time between harvest and delivering as narrow as possible. And for anyone listening who are packers and who may or may not use post-harvest fungicides, there are post-harvest fungicides available to help suppress disease. So you've got Scholar. These are post-harvest fungicides only. They are not in the field. So you've got Scholar, which is fludeoxonil, that's FRAC 12. We see this as a very robust chemical, being able to suppress many diseases. Pembotech, which is FRAC 9, FRAC group 9. This is a little weaker than Scholar, but it's better than nothing, especially if you have made problems out there. Academy is a new one. This is FRAC groups 3 and 12. And then lastly, the granddaddy of them all, Myrtec, which is FRAC 1. This FRAC group or this fungicide, there's a lot of blue mold populations or strains out there that are resistant to this FRAC group. So if you are using Myrtec, make sure you're combining it with something else. But again, this is for a smaller population of folks who possibly might be listening as far as the packers who may be thinking of post-harvest fungicides. I would say this might be a year to consider post-harvest fungicides, considering how rainy it was and how ideal conditions have been for possible stealthy fungi to cause latent infections, which may not show up until well after the fruit are harvested. So that's my spiel about apple rots, but just quickly about peaches, because I know peaches are still being harvested. We're still harvesting them here at the station. Just as a reminder to keep up with your rotation of different frat groups, different fungicides leading up to harvest. Those we typically recommend this, three fungicide applications at about 3 weeks, 2 weeks, and a couple days right before harvest to help limit post-harvest any rots occurring after harvest or post-harvest rots. Brown rot will be your biggest problem this year. I've also seen anthracnose, which is again caused by Calototricum, also showing up in our fruit, my own fruit, I should say, for my research. So there's a few rots out there, definitely we're seeing even in peaches. But again, if you keep up with your fungicide sprays, they should help suppress. And as far as organic options, for all of the rots, they're all the same, whether apple or peaches. You've got Serenade, you've got Double Nickel, you've got Sulfur, and Oso. They do show some efficacy, but they obviously are not as robust as our conventional or our synthetics. So you're going to have to be doubly efficient with regards to keeping those products on the fruit and doing frequent applications and hopefully moving your fruit quickly and not having them linger in storage too much. So that's my spiel for the update right now.
Yeah, sounds good. I can't think of anything else to add. So, and last but not least, Greg, Dr. Krawcheck.
Thank you, Don. We are getting to this portion of the season when some of you might really don't need to do anything, and some of you might still be worried about potential insect damage for another 2 months. It's really orchard specific, it's location specific, the pressure that you encountered earlier on, or something that you might or might not remember from last year. The big things right now in insect world are codling moth, oriental fruit moth, and brown marmorated stinkbug. Unfortunately, if you have them in the orchard or vicinity of your orchard, and this is specifically for brown marmorated, you might need to control them. I keep saying all of this conditional because I really, again, probably I do it every 2 weeks. Whenever we do this call, will stress out how helpful the monitoring traps should be, could be at this time of the season for you. If you have monitoring traps for codling moth or oriental fruit moth, and you know the lures that you're using are working, and because they work earlier on in the season, and now the numbers are low, and low numbers I would consider anything below 5, then maybe you do not need to spray anything against codling moth or oriental fruit moth. One thing about those two insects is that last year it was the first season when I experienced 3 full generations of codling moth here in the southern PA. This year we had the bioeffect relatively at the similar time as last year. The summer, although wet, does not appear to be much colder, so I expect that we still might have 3 full generations. Right now, we are in the middle of the tail end of the second generation of codling moth. Again, it varies from location to location. The farther south, the more likely you're going into the end of the second and beginning of the third generation. And if you see them in the traps and your numbers, again, there is not a real threshold how many will trigger you to spray. It's more based on the experience, based on the pressure that you know you had in the past, and so on. But if you have them in the traps, you basically have to add those insecticides to the fungicide sprays that Kari was talking about. What to spray? Um, Again, there are no silver bullets. We're still dealing with the same group of products. They will work against codling moth and oriental fruit moth. Uh, Diamides, and diamides include Altacor, Exirel, Verdeprim. I learned recently that there is already a generic Altacor on the market under the name Shenzi. Any one of those products should provide good control of codling moth and oriental fruit moth and your leaf rollers and potentially leaf miners. But I don't know if anyone even think about leaf miners that they are part of our system. But any one of those products will provide a good control. I would say application every 2 weeks will work. They have long residual activity. Again, a lot depends how fast, how much rain we will get and stuff like this, but at least they are not affected by the UV light. So those diamides will work excellent for you. If it happened that you already use diamides earlier on for controlling the first generation codling moth, your other two options that I think should be very effective is either delegate, and delegate also has a good residual activity, 2 weeks should work well, or your another option is to go and start using codling moth granulosis virus in products like Sidex, Madex, or Virosoft. Those three products are also registered for organic production. However, the big thing about using virus for controlling codling moth is, well, one good part is they have zero phi, but the other part is that they are not able to work longer than for about 7 days. The issue with the virus is that basically it's being deactivated by the UV light. And doesn't matter what rate you use, after 7 days, the activity is gone. So if you're gonna use virus, then application every 7 days are basically needed. Otherwise, you will leave your fruit unprotected. Again, your choice of products should really be based on what you see in your orchard. Some of you might not see them anymore, not see codling moth in the traps, not see oriental fruit moth in the traps, and then you don't need to control them. It's That's how it is. Again, people who use mating disruption and did some control for the first generation most likely don't have to worry about it. The bad part is that if you miss them or you misdiagnose or miscount, whatever word you're gonna use here, the larvae, the eggs that are being laid by this generation and the third codling moth and the fourth oriental fruit moth generation, they will be in the fruit at harvest. Those are the ones that actually people will find in your fruit if the fruit are not protected. So again, one group of products are diamides, and those include Altacor, Exirel, Verdeprim, and this generic Altacor under the name Shenzi. The other option is using delegate. And the third option is using codling moth granulosis virus with the products like Sidex, Madex, or Virosoft. Um, all those products will work for codling moth, oriental fruit moth, leaf rollers. However, they will not control at all brown marmorated stingbug. And this is a difficult year to guess what's going to happen with the brown marmorated stingbug. Usually, if we have a dry year, dry summer, this week, next week is the time when BMSB adults are actually moving into the orchard. The outside vegetation is getting drier, providing less nutritional value for those bugs, and orchards are still in a perfect shape, so they're moving to the orchard. Will this be happening this year? Probably yes. However, this movement might be delayed because of the quality of the food that they still have outside of the orchard. So again, if you don't have the traps in the orchard for BMSB out yet, put them out. Again, the traps will not protect your fruit, but the traps will tell you if you need to worry about the potential injury caused by the brown marmorated stink bug and if brown marmorated stink bug needs to be controlled. If, based on your experience or based on the traps, you know you have to do something, well, your only options are insecticides. Unfortunately, the active insecticide that we have for this pest, for BMSB, includes either pyrethroids or neonicotinoids. With pyrethroids, the best product overall is any product that contain bifenthrin. And bifenthrin is in Brigade, bifenthrin is in Bifenture, and a whole bunch of other generic products. I mean, this is one of the oldest pyrethroids that is on the market. But saying this, there is an issue here. Only Brigade, at least two formulations, the Evo and 2EC, actually have a normal label for use on palm fruit in Pennsylvania and in United States. The product called Bifenture, which is like a generic version of it, does not have stink bug on the label and does not have, is not registered for use or palm or stone fruit except on pears. So the active ingredient is the same. However, only Brigade has the label for being used on palm or stone fruit. So this is important to remember. They have the same active ingredient, but your other pyrethroid that should work would be danitol, and it also works very well against stink bug. If you think about neonicotinoids, and neonicotinoids, in addition to BMSB, they will also control, any leafhoppers that sometimes becoming annoying during the harvest. Then you can use Belay, you can use Admire Pro, you can use Assail, and any one of them will work well. However, those neonicotinoids, they have a much shorter residual. I mean, you can count 7 to 10 days. Why with the Brigade, your residual is going, well, 14, 21 days, and it will work. One thing about Brigade is that you have only 2 applications allowed per season, but those 2 applications have to be spread at least 30 days apart. And Brigade has 14 days PHI. So if you know that you have a problem and you know you have to do something, one of the strategies might be use a Brigade in the next 2 weeks and then come back and use it again 30 days later in September. This should help you cover the season, especially on the older cultivar. The cultivars that will be in the orchard longer. We're talking Fuji, we're talking Gold Rush, we're talking Pink Lady, and Sean might add some other cultivar that will be harvested later. So again, stink bug will be feed. Everything is weather dependent, but stink bug might be feeding still in November if they are in the area. Codling moth, normally we should be done by mid-September. Last year we were done not until mid-October. Oriental fruit moth will be active until end of October. So think about the cultivars that you're trying to protect. Think about when the harvest date is coming. Think about what pressure you have, and then make a decision. There is really not a one size fits all recipe right now or recommendation that can be applied to everyone. So this is something that it really orchard specific, site specific. And if you have orchard bordering woods, the chance for the stink bugs are much, much higher than in the block that is surrounded by hundreds of acres of other apples. The chance of stink bug being there is much lower than chance of the stink bug in any block that has a wild vegetation around it. And again, stink bugs are also on corn, stink bugs are also on soybean, and they can move to the orchard when the harvest happen. Again, I'm reaching far ahead right now, but this is something to think about when you make those decisions. And then I know harvest is not the time to think about insect control, but unfortunately, because of the weather, the way how the weather is changing right now, those insects are active much, much longer through September going into October than they used to be. So this is something to remember. That's really all I have for today. Any questions or comments? I would be happy to answer.
No, that sounds really good. Thanks, Greg. I think as Kari and you pointed out, right, just because we're moving into harvest doesn't mean that unfortunately, we can let off the gas. So it's something just to keep in mind. Um, yeah, unless anyone has anything else to add, I think we'll wrap it up. And thanks everybody for listening, and best of luck with harvest. And hopefully, we'll get some stratification between day and night temps and get some color. And hopefully, maybe things will cool off here in a bit. So, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks everyone for being on here. Say goodbye, everybody.
See you later.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.